Here's an interesting old photograph of a group of loggers with a crosscut saw and oxen standing beside a large fir log. Photograph was taken in 1890 in Washington State. In this picture we see the stern wheel-driven towboat, the Spieler, and a group of loggers on a river likely somewhere in southwestern Washington State. This photograph was taken in 1920. Here's a picture taken around 1930 that shows a trainload of log cars of the Mud Bay Logging Company at the Mud Bay Log Dump in Thurston County, Washington. The Mud Bay Logging Company went out of business in 1941. In this picture we see a group of loggers on a rail car. The men work for the Edgecombe Lumber Company out of Preston, Washington. The photograph was taken sometime between 1890 and 1895. This photograph from 1917 shows a falling crew that worked for the Coates-Fordney Lumber Company. The men lived in this work camp that consisted of rail cars converted to bunkhouses. Loggers used to use 7, 8, or 9-foot long saws with a man on each end. This photograph from 1900 shows an old yarding operation with horses. Notice the logs sunk into the ground to act as skids to keep the logs being towed from digging into the ground. And don't forget that small locomotive. This photo, probably taken in the 1890s, shows a large fir log on its way to the sawmill on a Northern Pacific flat car. It was taken in Snoqualmie, Washington. The log's at least 6 feet in diameter. Here's a picture from 1925 of a yarding crew working for the Crown Willamette Paper Company. The Crown Willamette was formed in 1914 when the Crown Columbia Paper Company merged with the Willamette Pulp and Paper Company. Really nice 1915 photograph here of the blacksmith crew for the E.H. Lester Logging Company. This outfit was in business in the Montesano area from 1910 to 1919 when it was merged into the Saginaw Timber Company. This image from 1924 shows Independence Logging Company's Railroad Logging Camp No. 5. The Independence Logging Company's headquarters were in Aberdeen, and it was in business from 1922 to 1927. Here's an image from 1915 of logs being loaded onto railroad cars using a donkey engine and gin poles. Here's a great old photo of a group of loggers standing on top of a pile of logs. Picture was taken in 1913 in Snohomish County, Washington. Interesting photograph here of a crew of railroad loggers with the donkey engine loaded onto a rail car. This photo was taken in Big Lake, Washington, however no known date was given. Here's a picture from 1908 of a Clear Lake logging train leaving the landing with a load of 4 cars of logs with just 1 log on each car. Here's a 1924 photograph of the track gang from Camp No. 2 of the Independence Logging Company. This gang was responsible for maintaining the tracks for the logging trains. A group of loggers getting their picture taken up top a load of logs on a logging railroad. This photo was taken in 1913 in Snohomish County, Washington. Here you can see a 1920 photo of a logging crew loading logs on shop-build flat cars for the Lincoln Creek Lumber Company. Lincoln Creek lumber logging operations were in business from 1906 to 1932. Here's a 1920 photograph of the Yeoman Lumber Company logging camp and mill. This camp was one of the first of a string of large mills between Chehalis and South Bend, Washington. This picture was taken in 1913. It shows the Gold Bar Lumber Company sawmill. This mill was located along May Creek in Snohomish County, Washington. Besides lumber, this mill also produced shingles. Great photo from 1910 of a logging crew taking time to get their picture taken. This logging scene was near Bellingham, Washington. A 1920 picture of the logging crew at Camp No. 4 of the Coates-Fordney Lumber Company. This camp was located in Grays Harbor County, Washington. Here's a 1920 photo of a crew running a donkey engine for the Goodyear Logging Company. Notice the little girl standing in the picture also. The Goodyear Logging Company, headquartered in Clallam Bay, Washington, was in business from 1915 to 1924. This photograph from 1923 shows a donkey engine and loading crew at work for the Workman Creek Logging Company. Notice the tongs hanging in the upper right corner of the photo. A dish fit for a king and a hard-working logger. This is a 1917 photograph of the interior of the mess hall at Camp No. 1 of the Coates Fordney Lumber Company. Here's a 1892 photograph of an oxen team yarding logs over a skid road in Washington State. Here's a photograph you don't see too many of. This is a 1921 photo of a railroad trestle being constructed in Grays Harbor County for the Aloha Mill and Lumber Company. This 1917 image shows an Emery and Nelson logging crew and donkey engine beside the railroad track. Emery and Nelson was in business from 1909 to 1928. Here's an old-timer logging truck for you. This picture was taken in 1921 and shows an old log truck sitting at the log dump of the Coal Creek Lumber Company. Coal Creek cut both fir and cedar and had their own railroad also. No forklift for you. Here's a 1916 picture of a jitney moving some lumber around the lumber mill of the Joe Vance Lumber Company in Malone. I would imagine a man would stay in pretty good shape hand-bombing lumber back then. Another donkey engine picture here. This one's from 1915 and shows the crew working loading logs on the rail cars for the Little Rock Logging Company. Little Rock was in business from 1910 to 1920. You won't find many logs this size anymore. Here's a 1908 photograph of a logging crew getting their picture taken sitting on some large old growth fir. Notice the donkey engine, line horse, and shay locomotive on the left. Great old photograph from 1900 of a logging crew posing with a logging locomotive. This photo is of the Hall and Bishop logging crew in Washington State. Here's a photo of the Simpson Logging Camp No. 1 taken in 1924. Camp No. 1 was in existence between 1918 and 1929 and was located between Dry Bed Creek and Decker Creek in Mason County. Here's a track crew laying rails for the English Lumber Company at Barney Lake on the Nuka Champs. You can see all the railway ties on the flatbed. This photo was taken in 1917. This photo was taken in the mid-1920s, somewhere in western Washington. The picture shows a Kelly Springfield logging truck as it prepares to haul a large log along out of the forest. Photograph taken in the mid-1920s shows another Kelly Springfield logging truck as it hauls a large fir log along a track-like wooden logging road. Back then, wood was used for roads because it was cheap and there was plenty of it. This picture from 1923 shows a falling crew with the National Lumber and Manufacturing Company. This company was in business from 1920 to 1927, with headquarters and mill in Hoquiam and logging operations first in Cedarville and then, by 1924, in Elma, Washington. The bunkhouse lifestyle. This photo from 1892 shows the interior of what would be the bunkhouse that housed the loggers back in the day. Looks a little bit too crowded for my kind of lifestyle. Pictured here is a 9-foot 8-inch fir log at the Wallace Lumber Mill in Washington. This photo was taken in 1911. Here's a really great photograph from 1919 showing a complete operation of a donkey engine, Spartree, flat cars along with a water tanker car, loading out logs at Camp 4 at the Saginaw Log Company. And finally, here's a photograph from 1916 showing a steam donkey engine loading logs onto a rail flat car. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video of Old West Coast logging, and I thank you for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.